Hi, my name is Jessica Udall, and today our topic is From Arriving to Thriving, What Newcomers Need. Long-term thriving, not just short-term resettlement, should be our goal for the refugees, the asylum seekers, the immigrants that we know. Their needs may be less apparent, but they're actually more crucial later on in their adjustment process. At first, they're in this honeymoon stage of cultural adjustment. They're running on adrenaline, but they have needs that are pretty easily met. And they're also excited about things, and so culture shock hasn't maybe fully set in yet. We have this established procedure that we can go through. Everyone needs an apartment, everyone needs a job, everyone needs to get their kids in school. These needs are real, but they're also pretty simple because they can be checked off a list, right? But people cannot be checked off a list. They're never done. And the needs of immigrants continue after that honeymoon period is over and after real culture shock has set in. Immigrants need locals, not just to welcome them initially, but also to commit to walk alongside them as they build new lives in a new place over time. When I think about how to help immigrants thrive, I think about building a house. And what are the essential components of a house? What's the first thing you think of? A foundation, right? So I would say the foundation for a house of thriving for immigrants would first and foremost be relationships. It's through relationships with safe individuals that I like to call bridge people that immigrants become able to thrive in a new culture. Bridge people are people who prove themselves to be safe by just being sincerely interested in a person from another culture and ready to help in any way that they can. And they become a bridge for that immigrant to connect confidently with the wider society. So bridge people don't really offer anything special or spectacular, but they offer something that's absolutely needed, a local connection that helps to connect the immigrant to the wider society. So we need more American Christians to be bridge people. This is a vital ministry. So the foundation of thriving for immigrants is relationships with bridge people. And so let's keep building the house now. What else is needed? We have to hold the roof up with something, so let's talk about some walls. We have 4 walls. Wall 1 is emotional support, because immigrants are people who are dealing with profound losses. The Somali British poet Warsan Shire writes of the refugee experience, "I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun, and no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home told you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind, crawl through the desert, wade through the oceans, drown, save, be hungry. Beg, forget pride. Your survival is more important. No one leaves home unless home is a sweaty voice in your ear saying, leave, run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I know that anywhere is safer than here." Loss, according to the dictionary, is both a fact and a feeling. It's a fact, the fact or process of losing something or someone, but it's also the state or feeling of grief when deprived of someone or something of value. Let's look for a moment at the types of losses that a refugee has endured by the time we meet him or her. Many of these are also going to apply to asylum seekers, to other immigrants, and then some particularly to refugees. You'll see as we go through this list. There's the loss of homeland. There's the loss of control over destiny. This includes their hopes and dreams, and sometimes even the fate of their physical bodies. There's the loss of the familiar. This may happen at least twice when leaving the homeland, and then maybe also when leaving a refugee camp where they may have spent years or even decades. There's a loss of comfort and confidence. There's a loss of cultural identity. There's a loss of a sense of safety, a loss of dreams, a loss of optimism, a loss of hope for reunification with relatives who are still in other parts of the world. And there are often more losses that are more personal to each refugee's experience. So these things I've mentioned are only kind of the general things that most refugees will experience. So one of the biggest needs of refugees, and then also of immigrants in general who at least have lost a homeland and lost the familiar, is to be tended to as people who are dealing with a deep sense of loss. So how do we deal with, or how do we treat people who are grieving losses in our own culture? Honestly, I think as a culture, we're not particularly good at caring for the grieving because we tend to give them space, right? But people who have gone through loss, they consistently say that what they want is for people to just continue to show up for them, to be there for them. Those who are grieving need a community around them, not just for the initial crisis, but also for the aftershocks and the long-term road of healing. So something, before we move on, that we should note here is that culture shock itself is a form of grief. And this is experienced by all immigrants to a certain degree. So when a person goes through culture shock, they feel as though someone has changed all the rules of the game of life, that they didn't give them an instruction manual, so they have to bumble around and figure it out as they go, like a child. So culture shock can, as you might expect, be a combination of confusing and humiliating and demoralizing. And it ebbs and flows like grief. It may be very difficult one day and maybe not so difficult the next day, but there's no linear path to move through culture shock. It depends on the individual. Their grief can manifest in several ways, but some of the more common symptoms are withdrawal, negative feelings toward the host nation, unhealthy coping mechanisms. This might be excessive alcohol, food, TV, you name it. Also stress, anger, and irritability. So how can you help someone who's going through culture shock? Simply, you can offer emotional support. And I have some more specific tips on the course website. You can take a look at this week's reading and see specific ways that you can help people dealing with specific elements of culture shock. But let's move on to wall number 2, which is English language, because language acquisition is the key that unlocks the door of cultural adjustment. Without this, newcomers can never truly feel at home. English as a second language classes are the gold standard for meeting immigrants, and I would only add here that we should view English classes as not an end in themselves, but as a springboard for outside of class friendships. The focus should be not on projects, but on relationships. Let's move on to pillar number 3, which is employment, because understanding the challenges of employment for immigrants equips us to help them succeed. So one of the hardest things for immigrants about moving to the United States is dealing with employment disappointments. Unemployment, of course, is disappointing, and many immigrants deal with this. Also, employment in low-level, back-breaking manual labor jobs can also be disappointing for many, especially if they were professionals in their homelands. And honestly, even if an immigrant gets a very good job, there still are disappointments or maybe just challenges for adjusting to a cross-cultural workplace for them. So employment is never easy for immigrants, and understanding that will help you to be a good friend for them. Many immigrants also need to get more than one job to survive, or maybe to provide for family members back home who view them possibly rightly as the chosen one who's gotten to live in a more affluent country and so is able to help with the very pressing needs of the extended family. And rather than say more in this video so it doesn't get too long, I would say just check out the reading material in this week of the course website to find more information on how to be good friends practically with immigrants regarding their employment. So let's move on to pillar number 4, and this is empowerment of youth, because when young people thrive, the whole family thrives. So this is a point of cross-cultural connection, right? All parents want their children to thrive and to have good lives. And 1 in 4 children in the US actually have immigrant parents. So according to Refugee Fellowship leader Dr. John Moira, one of the biggest hurdles that immigrant parents face is raising their children in a new country, because children quickly adjust to the culture and become Americanized, which may be perceived by their parents as contrary to their own culture. So this leads to tensions between the so-called first generation and second generation, as you've learned from Mahari Korcho in a previous video. So any service that can be offered to the children of immigrants is something that will improve the whole family's chance of thriving. This might be tutoring, it might be explaining paperwork, it might be offering parenting classes. By the way, not that immigrants can't parent, but parenting classes to help them know how to help their children thrive in a new environment that's not familiar to them, that they did not grow up in themselves. So kind of orienting them to the context that their children are growing up in. This is a felt need of many immigrants. The list goes on. There are many ways to help children of immigrants. So we're coming alongside immigrants as they build a new house so that they can thrive in a new place. And the foundation is relationships with bridge people, right? The walls are 1, emotional support, 2, English language, 3, employment, and 4, empowerment of youth. And the roof is thriving. Building a new life, it takes time. There's no way around this. Remember that there's seldom a quick fix that will make the lives of immigrants instantly easy. I wish there was. If you're a welcomer, you're along for a journey, and there's no shortcut. Though we can't teleport immigrants to a place of thriving, we can walk alongside them as they build new lives in a new place, as they move from arriving to surviving to thriving. We want to come alongside them. We want to be there for them. This is the slow, humble work of welcomers, and I'd welcome you to it. I'm glad you're here.